Hi, I'm Howard Harrison, Director of Operations with Build a Legacy. I'm so glad you decided to watch this segment today. I want to give you some nuggets of truth as it pertains to building teams as a manager or as a director, building teams with the element of trust laced throughout that team. Have you ever managed people who just didn't trust one another? If you have, you know that can be very challenging, very difficult, and extremely draining on you. A team without trust really isn't a team at all, but rather it's a bunch of people, a group of individuals working together, often finding themselves very disappointed and frustrated because they haven't been able to progress as it pertains to hitting their goals. However, we know when trust is on the scene, it really builds camaraderie and it allows a team to be in a position to be able to fulfill their goals. So I want to teach you and talk to you a little bit on how to build that trust within the team. Now, one of the things we have to understand, first of all, if we're going to do that, what's the definition of trust? The definition of trust, well, at least one of the definitions, is to rely on the character, the ability, the strength of the individuals that are around you that you're actually in a position that you're working with. Now, when you're able to actually find yourself with a group of people that you can trust, and you're actually in a position where you can work with a group of individuals that trust one another, that's a team that really can't be stopped. So let me give you 6 points. Let me give you 6 things that you can add to your team to make sure that trust is built within that team. Now, as a leader, you have to understand that one of the first things you actually want to do when you're building trust within your team is you want to, first of all, the first thing you want to do is you want to lead by example. I mean, if you're going to build trust within a team, the first thing the team has to see is that the leader's in a position where they are willing to trust their peers. They're willing to trust those that they are working with. You're going to have to lead by example and show your people that you trust those that you're surrounded by. There's nothing worse than working with somebody who is saying to you, you need to do something, and they're not doing it themselves. So the first thing you want to do as a leader is you want to build trust amongst your team by showing them you're willing to trust them. Now, the second thing you want to do is you want to be able to communicate openly. As a team leader, you have to be able to communicate openly. They have to be in a position where there's an environment that's being built where the atmosphere is conducive for others to want to communicate with their peers openly, especially if you're a leader. The last thing you need is people that are talking to you but are really not communicating with you openly because the atmosphere isn't conducive to it. You need to get yourself in a position where everyone on your team is talking to one another in an honest and meaningful way. You need to be in that position where you've created several strategies to accomplish this. First of all, you got to create a team charter to define the purpose of the team so they know where we're going, what we're trying to get accomplished, and when you're doing that, that puts your team in a position where they may be willing and will be willing to speak openly and honestly with you. The third thing you want to implement on the team is so that you can get this trust going is you want to be able to know each other personally. One way you can build trust and encourage your team members is to see their colleagues as people and not just employees or not just someone that I work with, but rather view one another as colleagues. People that you are not just someone that you see from 9 to 5, not just someone that you see at a job, hi today, gone tomorrow, out of sight, out of mind, but you gotta get to a point where you know each other personally. Beyond where you understand, where you encourage your team members to see their colleagues as people. We all have our ups, we all have our downs, but the fact that I've gotten to the point where I know you personally, I understand that nobody is perfect, we all go through stuff, and that puts me in a position where I want to trust you all the more. Why? Because maybe after work, we're socializing with one another, or maybe during lunchtime, we're going to lunch with one another. One of the other things when you're building your team is you don't want to place blame. You want to have this fourth ingredient where you can build trust by making sure you're not in a position where you are placing blame. In other words, when people work together, honest mistakes and disappointments actually happen. And it's easy to blame someone who causes these things. However, when everyone starts pointing fingers, the atmosphere can quickly shift, the atmosphere could quickly change, and people will find themselves not trusting one another because they're afraid, well, somebody's going to blame me or someone's going to point the finger at me, and people at that point in time will kind of divide, put a line within the sand and cut up their own territories, protect their own territories, because they got to protect their job. They know at the end of the day, while we're trying to build a relationship, if I can't trust you and you're actually pointing fingers at me, then you could also be in a position where you're taking food off my table. Why? Because at the end of the day, no matter how much I love my job and will work in extended hours, at the end of the day, I still am working for a paycheck so that I can put food on my table, be in a position to help my family. And if I can't trust those that I'm working with because they have the tendency of pointing fingers, then I know my job could possibly be in jeopardy. So you want to make sure that that fourth element of developing a team filled with trust is laced within it, which being what? Is to making sure that you don't place blame. When you're not placing blame, it puts the team in a position where they can trust each other all the more. Now, the fifth thing you want to make sure that you want to implement on a team is discourage cliques. You want to discourage cliques. Now, sometimes cliques can form within a team, often between team members that have strong levels of camaraderie, or where team members have the same likes or same ideas, and they can kind of group together, and that can be a good thing, but it can also form a clique, and it will also shun other people out or make other people feel less of when they're not invited into that particular group, if you will. And the reality of it is they're really developing a clique. And a clique can be developed because of common interests at work or common tasks that an individual may be on. However, these groups can even inadvertently form. It's not always intentional that it's being formed, but it makes others feel isolated. No one wants to be in a place where they're working with a team, and yet while on the team, they actually feel isolated. The sixth thing that you want to make sure in developing trust within a team, you want to make sure the sixth thing is discuss trust issues. Definitely want to be able to be in a position where you're discussing trust issues. If you manage and establish a team that has trust issues, it's essential, it's pertinent to find out how these trust issues originally developed. You may want to even go to the team and put out an anonymous survey, and where a survey where they're not putting their names on there, and you can ask the question, how do you think our level from 1 to 10, how do you think the trust level is amongst our team? And based on some of the information in which they give, you want to be able to turn back around and discuss that information with the team collectively, obviously making sure they didn't sign their name so that you won't be tempted to bring up a name. And this way you can get them talking about the different trust levels on the team and how they feel about the team, because it'll show that you actually care. And when it shows that you actually care, then they'll begin to care more as well, and they'll even trust you all the more. These are 6 points that you actually want to apply to building a team that's filled with trust. Now, you must also understand that trust is something that has to be built. In other words, when you have two people and they say that they're trusting one another, then there's a level of trust that they're both willing to give. But the moment this individual does something that makes this individual feel like trust was broken, then that trust is now diminished for this person. However, this is the individual that did something to breach trust. So their level of communication and trust remains the same. Even though they may have made up and this individual might have said, I forgive you. Well, this individual can't figure out, well, you said you forgave me, then why am I responding still on this level of trust and you aren't? Because what they fail to realize, though the person forgave you, trust is something that must be built. So as a result of that, we must understand that trust is something that has to be built. It takes work. And as a leader, building trust is something that can be done as long as the leader realizes that trust has to be built. So I'm so glad that you joined me on today, and I'm so glad you got an opportunity to hear those 6 points, implement those 6 points. And once again, thank you for joining me. I'm Howard. I am Director of Operations for Build a Life Legacy. I'm so glad that you are with us. Take care.